They yelled at me, "We don't have space for you." These were the words I heard on the morning of June 14th, 2024 at precisely 9:17 a.m. in the lobby of the Grand Magnolia Hotel in Savannah, Georgia, a place I have been coming to every summer for the last 23 years, and where I had spent exactly $21,763.84 on room bookings, upgrades, and special events over the past 5 seasons alone. But in that moment, every penny, every second, every effort felt like it had been erased, like it had never mattered. The receptionist crossed her arms and looked down her nose at me as if I were a ghost trespassing in someone else's life, and behind her a line of guests waiting to check in tapped impatiently their heels against the polished marble floor, the smell of fresh coffee from a nearby cafe clashing sharply with the bitter taste rising in my mouth from humiliation. I had arrived early at 8:55 a.m. after a 3-hour drive from Charleston in my blue Honda Accord 2009, the one I had spent months fixing. After it broke down last winter, making sure every detail was perfect, polished tires, checked oil and tire pressure, because I wanted to make a good impression, because I had reserved the presidential suite for exactly 72 hours starting that morning, which I had paid in full on May 30th, and even called 2 days before it confirmed my arrival. And yet here I was staring at the receptionist's blank stare, the words ringing louder than the brass bell at the front desk. "We don't have space for you," and I felt every ounce of blood drain from my face. I wanted to shout, I wanted to cry, I wanted to collapse right there on the glossy tile floor. But I stood frozen as my fingers dug into the leather strap of my briefcase, the same briefcase I had carried to countless business meetings, seminars, and family gatherings packed with receipts, contracts, and memories of summers long past. I glanced at the clock above the elevator doors, 9:18 a.m., and knew that in exactly 15 minutes, something had to change, or I would walk away carrying the shame of being invisible in a place I had supported for decades. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my daughter, Emily. "Dad, remember your value. They can't see it, but we do." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of generations of effort and care for my family, community, and friends. Every dollar saved, every party hosted, every gift given, every dinner arranged, all for this moment of recognition denied. And yet the bell rang again, a sharp clang that echoed in the lobby, and a man behind me whispered, "I've never seen someone treated like that in broad daylight." It's shocking. And I realized there were witnesses, strangers who might understand the injustice I felt. And you at home, if you have ever been ignored, belittled, or dismissed in a place where you thought you belonged, if you have felt the cold slam of rejection in the face of years of dedication, I want you to pause and imagine standing where I stood. Imagine the polished marble under your feet, the rich smell of brewed coffee in the air, the indifferent faces, and the words slicing through your chest, "We don't have space for you." And before you scroll away, before you click away, before you turn your head, I promise you, in exactly 15 minutes, what happened next changed everything. And if you have ever lived through something similar, I want you to leave your comment below, because this story is not just mine. It belongs to anyone who has ever been dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated in a world that pretends experience and loyalty matter, but often does not. I had spent decades building a life that many would call ordinary, but to me it was a series of deliberate choices, each one layering like bricks in a wall of security and pride. I was 63 years old on June 14th, 2024, and for the past 40 years, I had worked every day from 6:15 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. running my small consulting business in Charleston, South Carolina, where I had started with just $3,200 in savings and a borrowed typewriter that still sat in my office as a reminder of humble beginnings I had. Given countless hours mentoring young entrepreneurs, teaching them about spreadsheets, contracts, and client relationships, while never asking for recognition in return. I remember the summer of 1978, when I was 15 and walked 6 blocks in the scorching July heat to the local library in Mount Pleasant to borrow books on economics and leadership, while my friends played baseball. I remember the smell of the linoleum floors and the faint scent of ink from newspapers stacked on the shelves, the librarians always smiling and nodding approvingly at my dedication. Those same lessons had carried me through every decision in life, from investing $14,562.38 in a downtown Charleston condo in 1989 to the careful budgeting that allowed me to host my daughter's wedding in 2008 at the Seabrook Island Club, where the flower arrangements alone had cost $4,215. I had always been meticulous, precise, deliberate, and I carried that same devotion into my summers at the Grand Magnolia Hotel. I had started. Visiting in 2001 booking rooms for my family during July 4th weekend, spending exact amounts on spa treatments, $312.50 per hour on massages, and $78.90 per cocktail mixers for poolside gatherings. My neighbors in Charleston knew me as the man who never missed a community fundraiser, donating on average $1,150 per year to. Local schools and libraries, my friends in Savannah, had come to expect my presence at annual art fairs and jazz nights, where I would often slip $50 bills to the struggling performer behind the scenes. But none of this mattered on that morning in June when I arrived at 9:17 a.m. and was told that there was no space for me. I remembered the first subtle signs of disrespect a receptionist last year who had rolled her eyes when I asked for an extra pillow, the manager who had spoken over me in a staff meeting, saying, "Sir, we have protocols here." While I tried to explain a minor error in the billing of my suite, every little detail had been brushed off and I had let it slide because I believed in patience and grace. I remember the first summer I had arrived at the hotel in 2001 driving my old Chevy Nova with a trunk full of beach toys for my grandchildren. I had been greeted warmly, the smell of salt water in the air, the gentle creak of the wooden dock beneath my feet, and the scent of magnolia blooms drifting from the garden, and I had thought this was a place that respected loyalty. I remembered standing at the corner of Broughton Street in Savannah last winter. On December 18th, watching the city prepare for Christmas parade, I had donated $250 to a local school band and watched as my name was read aloud over the loudspeakers and felt a warmth spread through me because I knew my contributions mattered to someone. And yet here in June of 2024, every single act of generosity, dedication, and investment fell invisible, erased like it had never happened. And the contrast stung worse than any insult because I had never asked for attention, only fairness and acknowledgement for my time, effort, and loyalty. And I remember the sound of my own voice in the lobby saying, "I booked the presidential suite, I paid in full, and called 2 days ago to confirm my reservation." And the receptionist's flat monotone reply, "We don't have space for you." Cutting through my words like a knife slicing the air, I remembered every sacrifice made to ensure my summers were perfect, every dollar saved from $50 weekly lunches at the Charleston Diner to the $1,200 I spent on yearly car maintenance, every ounce of care I had poured into planning these trips, and every human connection I had nurtured in Savannah over 23 years. And I realized that the injustice was not only personal, it was systemic. And as you listen right now, if you have ever invested time, money, or emotion into something only to be dismissed, if you have ever felt the cold hand of indifference against your years of dedication, I want you to hold on to that feeling, because the story does not end. Hear and wait until you hear what happened next, because the humiliation, the disbelief, and the mounting anger would push me toward a decision that would change everything. And before we move forward, I want you to reflect on your own life. Think about moments when your efforts were overlooked, when you were dismissed despite giving your all, and share that memory in the comments below, because empathy is the first step before the storm that was about to come. The moment the receptionist uttered those words, I felt a shiver run down my spine. But I told myself to stay calm. I glanced around the lobby and noticed 3 other guests recording the scene on their phones, a woman in a red cardigan from Atlanta muttering, "This is unbelievable," a man with a camera bag nodding silently in agreement, and a teenager leaning against the elevator frame whispering, "Wow, he's getting treated so badly." And it made me feel both exposed and vindicated. At 9:20 a.m. I asked, politely, "Can someone check the reservation system?" I called 2 days ago and confirmed. The receptionist sighed loudly as if I were a nuisance and replied, "Sir, there's nothing we can do." Her voice clipped impatient and full of contempt. "We are full." I noticed her fingernails painted a glossy black tapping on the counter, like a metronome of my growing frustration. I tried to explain calmly. I paid in full for the presidential suite, $21,763.84. I have confirmations, emails, and receipts. She rolled her eyes, crossed her arms, and said, "Sir, our policy is strict. We don't have space for you." I felt my hands tighten on the leather strap of my briefcase and the heat rise to my face, but I stayed silent because shouting would give them satisfaction. I asked again, "Could I speak with a manager?" She pointed vaguely down the hallway, saying, "He's busy. We are very busy. You will have to wait." And I noticed a faint smell of bleach from the recently polished floors mixing with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the faint perfume of a guest behind me, and I swallowed hard. I remember the nights I had spent organizing fundraisers, donating over $5,000 to local schools, ensuring scholarships for underprivileged children. And yet here I was reduced to a number of nuisance and mistake. I had never been a person to escalate conflict, but the first hum of injustice turned into a roar when the line behind me murmured in disapproval. At 9:27 a.m., another receptionist appeared from the back with a clipboard. She glanced at me and said, "Sir, your reservation isn't showing in the system. Maybe you made a mistake." I felt a twinge of anger. I replied firmly, "No mistake. The confirmation is here, June 14th to June 17, Presidential Suite Room 501. She sniffed and muttered, "Well, sir, if you say so," and walked away, leaving me standing there like a ghost. And I noticed a teenager filming me shake his head in disbelief. I tried one last time, appealing to reason. "Please, I've been coming here for 23 years. I have supported this hotel financially and socially. I have donated to your charity events and community gatherings." And the first signs of arrogance and cruelty became obvious. The original receptionist leaned forward, smirked slightly, and said, "That doesn't matter. We have policies, and policies come before people." The words cut deeper than any insult I had ever heard. At 9:35 a.m., a small crowd had formed around me, some whispering, some recording. I felt both humiliated and strangely empowered because witnesses existed. People were seeing what they were doing, and yet the indignity continued. A bell rang, signaling the arrival of a new guest, and the receptionist turned to greet them warmly, smiling with genuine pleasure. While my presence seemed to fade into the background, I noticed the smell of leather from their suitcase and the shiny reflection of their polished shoes mocking me. I had tried every tactic: patience, politeness, evidence, and reasoning, and yet each attempt was met with more dismissiveness and arrogance. At 9:42 a.m., I realized the line of my tolerance had been crossed. I remember my father teaching me, "Never let them see you bend without cause." And I felt the quiet rage building inside me like a storm about to break. The whispers grew louder. "Can you believe they're treating him this way? This is outrageous. I've never seen such disrespect." And it confirmed that I was not alone, that others recognized the injustice of the moment. And as the receptionist sneered, "If you can't handle it, maybe you should go elsewhere," I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of decades of dignity and effort settle into a decision. I would not act impulsively, but I would act strategically, and the line of my tolerance had been irreversibly crossed. And before you continue watching, ask yourself what you would do if every polite attempt failed, if your decades of investment, dedication, and loyalty were dismissed publicly in front of strangers and witnesses. And hold that thought, because in the next chapter, you will see the moment I decided not to accept humiliation anymore, the moment I discovered the power I had kept hidden, and the calm before the storm that would change everything. Standing there in the lobby at exactly 9:45 a.m., I felt a shift in the air, something subtle yet undeniable, like the moment before a summer storm. The polished marble under my feet seemed colder, and the faint aroma of coffee and bleach mixed with the distant scent of magnolia outside. And I realized I had two choices: continue to accept humiliation or take control of the situation. I took a deep breath, remembering my late wife, Margaret, who had always told me, "Wilson, dignity is silent until it speaks with power." And in that instant, I made a conscious decision to no longer let arrogance and ignorance dictate my worth. At 9:46 a.m., I pulled out my phone and opened an app one had rarely needed but had maintained for years, a database of contacts, connections, and legal resources meticulously organized over decades, starting from the first call I made to a Savannah attorney in 1982 to my current network of city officials, business leaders, and media contacts. I scrolled silently, taking care not to draw attention as the receptionist glanced at me with impatience. I remembered every strategy one had learned in business negotiations, every tactic to turn a disadvantage into leverage, every time I had been underestimated by younger colleagues or competitors, and I realized now I could apply it here. I recalled the months I had spent cultivating relationships with local journalists, providing them stories about community events and donations totaling $12,450 over the past 10 years, and I knew that if I needed witnesses, the media would respond. I glanced at the three strangers still filming the scene and the whispers of the crowd murmuring disapproval, and realized their presence amplified my potential leverage. The receptionist smiled smugly at 9:50 a.m., thinking she had won. But she did not know that my calm exterior masked years of accumulated influence, experience, and quietly amassed power. I adjusted my posture, felt the leather of my briefcase under my fingers, and imagined the steps I would take. Methodically, without anger, without rashness, every move calculated to restore fairness, not for revenge, but for justice. I recalled the small community donations I had made in the neighboring neighborhoods of Savannah, including $2,300 to the local senior center, where I knew the director would vouch for my character, and the countless volunteer hours I had logged mentoring at-risk youth, totaling 176 hours, and I realized all these investments were invisible weapons waiting for their moment. I noticed a digital clock above the elevator doors tick to 9:52 a.m., and in that silence, I crafted a plan step by step, a quiet storm of preparation. I would first document the injustice immediately. I would call one of the local journalists. I had befriended a woman named Patricia from the Savannah Morning News, who had reported favorably on my charity events in the past. Then I would escalate by contacting city officials to verify the validity of my reservation. And finally, I would ensure that this would be witnessed publicly and recorded permanently. I remembered my father's words again. Never let them see fear, only calm readiness, and I felt a strange serenity wash over me. I smiled, subtly noticing the receptionist frown slightly, sensing that my composure had changed, and I realized that my calm was a new kind of power. She could not see it yet, but she would soon. The crowd around me shifted uncomfortably as the whispers grew louder. Something's about to happen. He's not leaving. I've never seen anyone so calm in this situation. And I felt a wave of confidence because I knew the scale of the storm I was preparing was proportional to the injustice I had endured. I checked my emails one more time to make sure the confirmation was easily accessible. The screenshots dated May 30th and June 12th glowing on my screen, a tangible proof of years of dedication and investment in this hotel. In that moment, I understood that strategy, calm observation, and timing would be my allies, not anger or confrontation. And as the clock ticked to 9:55 a.m., I was ready to move silently, methodically, decisively. And you at home, if you have ever faced injustice, if you have ever been dismissed despite your efforts, hold that feeling. Because in the next chapter, you will witness the revelation of hidden power the moment the tables turned and the quiet observer became the force. No one could ignore the calm before the storm, the turning point where dignity met strategy and justice began to take shape. By 10:02 a.m., I had quietly positioned myself near the concierge desk, my briefcase resting lightly against my leg. I had sent a discreet text to Patricia at the Savannah Morning News emergency story. Grand Magnolia Lobby Injustice. Please come quickly. And within minutes, I could feel the anticipation building. The receptionist, still unaware of the storm, quietly gathering behind my calm exterior, smiled condescendingly. Sir, are you ready to leave now? And I shook my head slowly. Not yet, I said. Softly, my voice steady and calm, but laced with authority. She blinked once, twice, unable to grasp the subtle shift. I felt the faint vibrations of my phone against my leg, indicating Patricia had already arrived with her camera crew, the software of equipment. From the hallway, a smell of warm coffee drifting in from the cafe, and the faint metallic scent of the polished elevator doors all combined into a moment of tense expectancy. I slowly opened my briefcase and placed a set of documents on the counter. Reservation confirmations dated May 30th and June 12th, totaling $21,763.84 receipts for past stays over 5 seasons, a notarized statement of loyalty and contributions to the hotel's charity events, including donations of $3,250 in 2018 and $2,675 in 2020. My hand shook slightly, not from fear, but anticipation of the inevitable recognition I would receive at 10:08 a.m. A voice behind me called out, Mr. Wilson, we have arrived. Patricia and her cameraman stepped into the lobby, capturing every detail of the scene. Immediately, the crowd of guests paused their chatter and turned their attention toward the unfolding revelation. I looked at the receptionist and calmly said, You may want to verify these documents before speaking further. Her face paled slightly as she scanned the notarized papers and receipts and muttered, I didn't realize. But she couldn't finish her sentence. The 3 strangers recorded me earlier now looked wide-eyed, whispering. I knew something was off. This is incredible. He has everything in order. And the murmurs spread like wildfire through the lobby. At 10:12 a.m., I gently removed a small envelope from the briefcase containing my letter of authorization, showing I have full access to the Grand Magnolia account for VIP clients, including the presidential suite bookings for the next 5 years, and a list of prior contacts in Savannah City Council, confirming my credibility and commitment to the community. The receptionist's shoulders slumped as she realized that every dismissive word she had uttered had been based on arrogance and ignorance. At 10:15 a.m., Patricia stepped forward with a microphone. "Mr. Wilson, can you tell us what happened here?" And I replied, "For over 23 years, I have supported this hotel financially and socially. I have followed every protocol, and yet this morning I was dismissed publicly. The injustice was witnessed by multiple guests and staff, and now it is being documented." The crowd gasped as her cameraman panned across the lobby, capturing the scene, and the whispers of support grew louder. Finally, someone stood up. "He deserves this. Unbelievable." I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that the power I had kept hidden for decades was finally manifesting. The receptionist stammered, I apologize, sir," but it was too late. Her words fell flat as the reality of my position and influence had become undeniable. At 10:18 a.m., the hotel manager arrived, rushing into the lobby, checking the documents with his assistant. He looked up at me, his eyes widening as he realized the scale of the oversight. "Mr. Wilson, we will correct this immediately," he said, nervously glancing at the cameras, and guest Patricia nodded approvingly. "This will be in the morning edition," and I realized that every preparation, every connection, every silent investment had led to this precise moment. The receptionist now avoided eye contact. I noticed a faint color of panic in her cheeks, the metallic taste of her fear almost palpable in the air, and I felt a subtle shift in power completely reverse what had begun as public humiliation transformed into undeniable recognition. At 10:22 a.m., my calm demeanor allowed the hotel staff to process their mistake and witness the consequences of their arrogance in real time. The whispers of admiration from the crowd. "He's incredible. I would never have guessed." Absolute dignity reinforced the legitimacy of the situation, and I knew that the revelation of my hidden power had changed everything in that lobby forever. And you at home, if you have ever been underestimated, if you have ever been ignored or dismissed, take note that true power is often silent, invisible, until circumstances call for it, and in the next chapter you will witness the immediate consequences. The public justice, the reversal of humiliation, and the beginning of change that no arrogance could undo. By 10:25 a.m., the lobby had transformed completely. The air, thick with tension just minutes ago, now buzzed with murmurs of approval and relief as Patricia's camera crew captured every angle. The hotel manager stood beside me, frowning nervously as he typed rapidly into his tablet, summoning staff members to correct the mistake, and I watched as the receptionist, once smug, now shuffled papers nervously, her shoulders hunched, lips pressed tightly together, and a faint sheen of sweat on her forehead. Catching the morning light streaming through the grand windows, the first action taken was the immediate allocation of the presidential suite to me. The assistant manager approached at 10:28 a.m. with keys in hand and a sheepish apology. "Mr. Wilson, we reviewed the reservation system. Your booking is valid, and we will honor it fully." I nodded calmly, acknowledging the gesture without triumph, letting the gravity of the moment speak louder than words. The guests who had witnessed the humiliation earlier now began whispering in astonishment. He stood his ground, and it worked. Finally, justice, incredible composure, and the sound of their voices, the tapping of heels on the marble floor, and the low hum of cameras created a symphony of validation that was both overwhelming and quietly satisfying. I noticed that the receptionist attempted to interject, "Sir, but I raised a finger slightly, signaling that her words were no longer necessary, her voice fading as the crowd's attention focused elsewhere. At 10:32 a.m., the manager made an official public acknowledgement, clearing his throat and speaking firmly. "On behalf of the Grand Magnolia Hotel, we sincerely apologize for the treatment you received, Mr. Wilson. All staff members involved have been counseled and retrained to ensure this does not happen again." His eyes darted nervously to the camera, and the murmurs of approval grew louder, guests nodding and whispering. Finally, they are held accountable. This is how it should be. Unbelievable. I observed as immediate corrective actions took place. A receptionist was reassigned temporarily to administrative duties away from the front desk, her face flushed and posture defeated, a clear consequence of the arrogance and dismissive behavior she had exhibited mere minutes before. The manager personally oversaw the confirmation of my suite, ensuring every service I had booked was in place, including the spa appointment at 11 a.m. for $312.50 and the personalized breakfast service at 7:45 a.m. tomorrow. With the $78.90 cocktail mixers I had requested, the moment had shifted entirely. The balance of power was undeniable. and witnesses were actively recording and sharing the story with staff and guests alike. At 10:38 a.m., a small crowd of guests approached me, expressing support and validation. "I can't believe they treated you like that. You handled that so gracefully. I wish I had your composure." And I felt an overwhelming sense of collective vindication, knowing that my experience was not just personal, but a lesson for the entire community. I noticed Patricia taking notes and speaking rapidly into her recorder. "This will be front page tomorrow. Mr. Wilson, your story is remarkable." The realization that the media would document every detail amplified the consequences. For those responsible, the receptionist now stood near the back of the lobby, avoiding eye contact with guests and colleagues. Her previous arrogance replaced with visible discomfort and humiliation, a direct and immediate consequence of the injustice she had attempted to enforce earlier. The staff quickly corrected all miscommunications, acknowledging past errors publicly, issuing confirmations to ensure no further oversight, and implementing immediate systemic changes, including new verification protocols and clear escalation procedures for VIP clients. The energy in the lobby shifted entirely, whispers of awe and admiration replacing murmurs of disbelief as the truth unfolded before everyone's eyes. The injustice that had begun as private humiliation had been reversed in full public view, and I realized the power of preparation, patience, and quiet strategy in bringing about real-time justice. And you at home, if you have ever felt powerless, overlooked, or humiliated, remember that sometimes the immediate consequences can be transformed by calm, determination, and methodical action. And in the next chapter, the final chapter, you will witness the lasting transformation of reflection, the lessons drawn, and the powerful call to action that turned a personal victory into an inspiration for everyone who has ever been dismissed or underestimated. By 10:50 a.m., as I settled into the presidential suite, the weight of the morning slowly lifted, replaced by a profound clarity I had never experienced before. I looked around the room, noting the subtle scent of magnolia from the open balcony door, the polished oak furniture, the crisp white linens embroidered with golden threads. And I realized that the humiliation I had endured was not just a personal battle, but a catalyst for transformation and reflection over the next 30 minutes. I recounted the events silently to myself, every detail. The exact words spoken by the receptionist at 9:17 a.m., "We don't have space for you." The precise amount of my investment, $21,763.84. The witnesses from Atlanta, Charleston, and Savannah. The media documentation. It all coalesced into a story not just of injustice, but of empowerment. I remember my daughter Emily's text that morning. "Dad, remember your value. They can't see it, but we do." And I understood that the journey I had taken was mirrored in countless lives, invisible until action is taken. I thought of my neighbors in Charleston who had seen me work tirelessly for decades mentoring young entrepreneurs, donating over $12,450 to local charities, and organizing community events. All the unseen work, all the silent dedication. And I realized that dignity and patience combined with strategy can transform not just a moment, but a legacy. I called Patricia from the Savannah Morning News and spoke calmly. "Patricia, thank you for coming. The story matters. It needs to inspire others." A reply, "Absolutely, Mr. Wilson. Your composure and foresight will resonate with so many." And I felt the ripple effect of my actions reaching beyond the lobby, beyond the hotel, into a wider world of witnesses. And readers. The hotel staff had already implemented new policies, ensuring no future dismissals of loyal clients, and the receptionist, once smug and dismissive, had been reassigned with training, a visible sign that justice had not just been served but institutionalized. I reflected on the lesson for anyone who has ever felt powerless or dismissed. Decades of effort, loyalty, and investment are never truly invisible, even when others fail to acknowledge them. And I realized that the true power lies in preparation, calm observation, and the courage to act strategically rather than react impulsively. I remembered the precise sound of the lobby bell at 9:17 a.m., the polished marble floor beneath my feet, the faint aroma of coffee and bleach, the whispers of strangers, the camera recording everything, and understood that all those sensory details had become part of a narrative that would inspire, caution, and validate countless others. I spoke softly into my phone. For anyone watching this story, know that injustice can be reversed, dignity can be restored, and the quiet power within you can change outcomes beyond your imagination. I thought of the audience, especially those over 50 who had faced dismissal, ageism, or invisibility, and knew that sharing this story would validate their experiences, spark conversation, and create a community of resilience. I looked out the window at the Savannah streets, sunlight bouncing off Broughton Street, children laughing nearby, the scent of magnolia drifting on a warm breeze, and realized that transformation is both internal and external, that our reactions to injustice define our legacy more than injustice itself. I sat in the plush armchair, feeling the leather, the texture of the embroidered linen beneath my fingers, and I made a promise to continue advocating for fairness, mentoring the next generation, and sharing lessons from decades of life experience. I leaned back, took a deep breath, and thought about your home. If you've ever been overlooked, dismissed, or undervalued, understand that your dignity and strategy are your greatest assets, and I encourage you to reflect on your own life. Consider moments where calm, calculated action could turn the tide, and share your story in the comments below, because your experience matters and can empower others. Now I invite you to subscribe to this channel, activate the notification bell, and join a community dedicated to exposing injustice, celebrating resilience, and learning from lived experience together. And finally, remember that humiliation is temporary, but strategy, patience, and dignity create lasting transformation. Never forget that the moment you choose to act with integrity and foresight, you shift the balance of power forever. In the story of June 14th, 2024 in the Grand Magnolia Hotel is proof that even in the face of public dismissal, calm, preparation, and strategic action can create not just personal justice, but systemic change and inspire everyone who witnesses it.